Welcome to One Sweet Dream, a podcast where we explore the dream that was and is the Beatles. Hi everyone, Diana here. Welcome to this little bonus episode, which is a companion piece to my discussion with Chris Salewicz. I hope you've checked out my discussion with Chris. It's called Paul as Artist, a conversation with Chris Salewicz. I highly recommend it because A, it's on my podcast, but also it's packed full of great foundational information about McCartney. So if you want to dig further into McCartney, it should be of interest to you. But also, Chris is just a charming, insightful, delightful human being. And we had some terrific conversations. So please check it out. It's where it's at. Also, just a heads up, this interview with Chris has been updated with new and improved audio, because the last one got oddly compressed when uploading it to the podcast provider and was, in my opinion, pretty well unlistenable, which I'm very sorry about, but it's all been resolved now, so please check it out. And as a little peace offering, I have had Chris's 1986 interview with McCartney cleaned up, so it's a little easier to listen to. Just a little bit of background about this interview in case anyone doesn't know. This is a famous in the Beatles world, interview with Paul, because Paul is unusually candid and forthcoming and unguarded in this interview. And anyone in the Beatles world knows that unguarded and candid McCartney is a beautiful and rare thing. So this interview is intriguing. But this audio is actually Chris's personal recording for his written piece in Q magazine. So it was never meant to see the light of day, which is why the original, the one that you can find on YouTube, sounds like they are having the loudest conversation in the world's loudest cafe in the middle of a freeway. So, it's not easy to listen to, but the content is fantastic, which is why I thought it was worth uploading to the podcast and cleaning up a little bit. So I hope you enjoy it. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe, rate, review, and stay tuned for more great stuff in the future. And that's it. Happy listening. Take care. Bye for now.
There it is your presentation. You meant to get every bit of it right.
So, how do you react to criticism? Do you take
I don't really know. Now I'm being very flash and very nonchalant and saying I don't care. But I haven't seen too many reviews. And when I see bad reviews, it'll hurt me. But I am giving myself a bit easier time in life these days. I've gone through so much criticism, and not just from critics, from people like that, like a fool, I can actually just stood there and sort of said, yeah, well, you must be right, I've done this, that wasn't too nice. I'm beginning to see it a bit differently now. I'm beginning to see a lot of what they say is their problem, not mine, a lot of the time. And in John's thing, when as you obviously know, he was going through a lot of pain when he said a lot of that stuff. And he felt that we were being kind of vindictive against him and Yoko. In actual fact, I just answered a question on the American TV thing. I think we were quite good, looking back on it, and knowing people in life. Many people would have just down tools with a situation like that. You just said, look, man, she's not sitting on our amps while we're making a film. That wouldn't be unheard of. It's Sean Penn. Do you know what I mean? Right. That most people would just say, we're not having this person here. Don't care how much you love her. But we were actually quite supportive. Not supportive enough. It would have been nice to be really supportive, because then we could look back and say, weren't we really terrific? But looking back on it, I think we were okay. We were never really that mean to you. I think a lot of the time, John suspected meanness where it wasn't really there.
Oh, he's presumably very paranoid.
I think so. He warned me off Yoko once. Look, this was my chick, just because he knew my reputation. We knew each other rather well. And I felt, I just kind of said, yeah, no problem. But I sort of did feel he ought to have known I would. He was going through, I'm just a jealous guy, and he was a paranoid guy. And he was into drugs, heavy.
Yeah, which makes you
He
proud.
was into heroin. And
Yes, I know.
see, which I hadn't realised till just now. It's all in my brain. I was just figuring, oh, there's John, my buddy, and he's turning on me because he perceives that I'm the McCartney bandwagon. He once said to me, oh, they're all on the McCartney bandwagon. He was in it. And to me, I was just releasing a record. Okay, so you can call it McCartney bandwagon, but it's no harm. It's no more than anybody else does when you put out a record. Yeah. And yeah, things like that were hurting him. And looking back on it now, I just think it's a bit sad, really.
Yeah, because I saw that thing in the Observer last week.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that starts to show some of the pain he was going through. I think, okay, I mean, you know, hell, anyway, look, he was a great guy, great sense of humor. If he did it, I'd do it all again. I mean, I'd go through it all again and have him slag me off all again. You know, just because he was so great. Those are all the down moments. But there was much more pleasure than has really come out. Every article now, I'm always saying, I'm sorry, there's some other dramas. Really, I'm quite happy. I mean, I had a wonderful time with one of the world's most talented people. That's like a plus. I say, we had all these crazinesses. But for instance, if someone took one of your wedding photos, if you're married, someone took your wedding photo and put a funeral on it, you tend to feel a little bit sorry for the guy. You think, wait a minute, you know. I mean, I'll tell you what, if I'd ever done that to his thing, it would have just hit the roof. But I kind of just sat through it all and was mild-mannered Clark Kent.
But this must be hurting you physically, though, or
Not half, yeah.
But I mean, when did you actually get a perspective on it?
I still haven't. It's still inside me. I was just talking to someone the other day. I said, John was lucky he got all his hurt out, got all his pain out, he got all his feelings out. I'm not really that kind of person. I'm a different sort of personality inside me that sort of is still trying to work it out. And that's why, you know, it's kind of good to see that wedding funeral bit, because I started thinking, wait, this is someone who's going over the top. This isn't just your average jibe. This is like paranoid. This is paranoia manifesting itself. And so my feeling is just like it sort of was at the time, which is like, you know, he's my buddy. I don't really want to do anything to hurt him, or his memory, or anything. I don't want to hurt Yoko. But at the same time, it doesn't mean I understand what went down. Or it doesn't necessarily. I mean, I went at Yoko's request. I went to New York recently. Did you say she?
No.
I went to New York. She said she wanted to see me, and I said I was going through New York and stuff. And so I kind of stopped off and rang her. She said she couldn't see me that day. I was in New York. I was like 400 yards away from her. And I said, well, I mean, I'll pop over any time today, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whenever you can squeeze me in. She said, it's going to be very difficult. I said, well, okay, I understand. What is the reason, by the way? She said, I was up all night with Sean. I said, well, I understand that. I got 4 kids, and I understand that it's terrible. But you're bound to have a minute today, sometime. I said, I'm leaving soon. Can't really hang around. And she asked me to come. Flown in specially.
Oh, wait, you've gone there specially?
Yeah,
See her?
yeah, to see her. She didn't see me. So I kind of a little bit humiliated, but I said, okay, 9:30 tomorrow morning then. Let's make an appointment. She rang up about 9 o'clock. She said, could you make it tomorrow morning?
But I mean, completely off the record, I mean, she's still on something, isn't she? I was told she's still on methadone, isn't she?
I don't know. I really don't know.
I mean,
I honestly don't know, man. I honestly don't know. So that's the kind of thing, you know, what I'm saying is like, it wasn't all my fault. I'm beginning to let myself off a lot.
Do you have a lot of guilt? Did you
Yeah.
take them?
Yeah, well, when some of the world's greatest entertainer calls you Engelbert Humperdinck, you get feelings of something. And yeah, I always felt guilty. Always felt guilty. But looking back on it, I keep thinking, okay, let's try and analyze it. Now, John was hurt. What was he hurt by? What was the single biggest thing that we can find in all our research that hurt John? Now, the biggest thing I can find is that I told the world the Beatles were finished. I don't think that's so hurtful. I know he'd said, you know, it was like, for publicity for my album. Which, I don't even think that's hurtful. Big deal.
No,
4 months after the group.
Traditionally, people do these things at the point anyway. Like, you know what I mean?
4 months after the group's broken up, and we've waited for 4 months to see if we could get back together again, I then announced. I'll tell you what was unfortunate, the method of announcing it all, which again, there's a story behind that, which was that I said to the guy at the office, happened to be Peter Brown of book fame, I said, I've got an album coming out, can't we? I don't really want to see too much press. Can you do me some question and answer things? So I answered them all. We had them printed up and put in the press copies of the album. But I think the perception of that when it arrived on the journalist's desk was, oh, this is McCartney, really from it now. And I kind of shudder. I think, oh, bloody hell. I could see it quite clearly. At the time, it was me trying to answer some questions that were being asked. And I decided to not fudge that question. And I say, looking back on it, I don't think, if that's the most hurtful thing I did, I haven't really heard much else beyond that. We didn't accept Yoko totally. But like I say, how many groups do you know these days? It's a joke. It's like Spinal Tap.
Of course.
It's the Spinal Tap joke.
Actually, it's something I always thought, I always have this assumption. I go to interview groups, say you interview everyone. You think everyone knows what's going on. Then you talk to individual members and you find no one knows what's going on. They don't communicate at all, and then you start seeing it on stage, you suddenly see how separate they are on stage.
Daltrey and Townsend,
or the Clash was the same,
Daltrey and Townsend on Live Aid. Pete started copying Roger's movements because he knows exactly what Roger's going to do. And so in the end, Roger started doing Pete's movements. They pissed each other up, so it's terrible, actually. But anyway, generally speaking, what I'm saying is, I love John. I was his best mate for a long time. Then the group started to break up. It was very sad. I got the kind of rap as being the guy who wrote the group up. Well, that's not actually true.
But you had to actually do it anyway to get out of that.
It wasn't actually true. Yeah, legally I had to.
But he'd already said
it was broken actually months before, yeah. And so I got into this legal thing. And, looking back on it, I say I got a lot of guilt of that. But you tell me what you would have done if the entire earnings that you'd earned, and it was something like the Beatles, entire earnings is a big figure. This is everything we'd ever done through all the American tours, all the record success, everything we'd ever done up to somewhere around about Hey Jude. And that was about to disappear. It was about to go into someone's pocket. And the guy I'm talking about is Klein. And he had $5 million the first year he managed the Beatles. So I smelled a rat. I thought, well, $5 million in 1 year, how long is it going to take him to get rid of it all? So I started to resist, and I was given a lot of pressure. They said, oh, you're always stalling. This is when they came to sign Klein's contract. You probably heard of this.
But they thought it was part of you being involved in Linda's role, didn't they? You wanted to get the Easters involved.
They said, who are we going to get? We looked at Lord Beeching. Looked at all these people. John interviewed Lord Beeching because he's done the railways so great. And then you get it. But we wanted what we called Mr. X. We knew we needed someone after Brian. And so we had a meeting in Iceland and said, we really needed Mr. X. And if we can get someone really great, it'd be fabulous. So then the Beeching thing came along, and then I just met my in-laws, the Eastman, and I was pretty impressed. And he's a pretty impressive guy. And it would have been great. But obviously everyone worried that because it was my father-in-law, I'd be the one who'd look after. I think there must obviously be some element of that. So that worried him. And quite naturally, they just said, no, we can't have him. So in the end, it turned out to be Klein. And I said to people, well, I want out of this. And they said, you can't. I said, I want to sue this guy, Klein. And they said, you can't. He's not a party to any of the agreements. So it became clear I had to sue the Beatles. So obviously I became the baddie. I put on a black hat. But afterwards, you see, the thing is, it's like when you get in a sensation in the newspaper, the retraction is always a week later on the back sports page, the bottom of the sports page. The truth of that whole thing is that, yes, I did take the Beatles to the High Court, which is like a highly traumatic period, having to front that one out. You know, imagine seriously having to front that one. The
How
world's,
do you feel through
the
it?
world's
How do
like
you feel through it?
crazy, just insane, so insecure. Half the reason I grew the beard, all the other reasons split.
Yeah, but I know people actually, when they put hair on their face, often to hide.
It's often a cover up, yeah. And I had this big beard, so went to the High Court and everything. I managed to save that, and the judge said something about the prattle of a second-class salesman, talking about a client. They put in evidence this big, expecting us not to look at it, because their side, I don't think, looked at what they put in. But because my whole life was on the line at that point. I felt this was the fire, this was the furnace, you know. Finally, it arrived. And we used to get shakes in our voices. Neil asked me, well, you talk to Neil about some of the meat things. We got the Nixon shakes. It was something we never ever had before. Remember Neil quite clearly trying to, the aforementioned parties. This that's going to help anyway. Peace on earth, boys. But yeah, so we went through a lot of all those problems. But the nice thing was to say afterwards, the little retraction on the sports page was that each one of them in turn, just very, very quietly, very briefly said, "Oh, thanks for that." Save all the money on it. That was about all I ever heard about it. And then to this day, no one's ever gone into depth.
No, that's never actually been said, but perhaps it has been that you were right. You know, in the end, you were right.
So that's what I mean, you know. Well, it was actually said, but again, see, John turned it round, like this thing in the Observer. He said, "But you're always right, aren't you?" See, there was always this thing. So I mean, it was crazy for me because I come from Liverpool, and I thought the idea was to try and get it right, you know. And it was quite surprising to find that if you did get it right, people could then turn that one around and say, "But you're always right, aren't you, smarmy?" Or whatever, you know. You go, oh, and I'm like intelligent enough to be able to see that angle the minute they go, "Oh, shit, I hadn't thought of that." It's like moving the goalposts. It's that one, you know, it's like, oh, okay, fair enough. I mean, it occurred quite a few times, you know, because I'm pretty, they kind of, you know, ruthless, ambitious, all that stuff. Not showbiz. But I'm pretty, can be pretty forceful. If we've got to make a record, I'll actually sit down and write songs.
See, I was actually,
which can be interpreted as being overpowering and forceful. Go ahead.
I was told, I mean, that in fact, and I'd heard this over the 70s, really, that you were kind of, you'd be more interested if you hadn't been around to keep him out, say in the early days.
Yeah, sometimes. I remember doing Let It Be. We sat in Apple around the table, and I come up with this idea, you know, that we should hear. Could be anyone who had the idea, but it happened to be me that Let It Be. I said, "Be good, you know, if we kind of got in a film." And I remember Johnson said, "Why? What for?" I kind of explained a bit more. He said, "Oh, I get it. You want a job?" "Yeah, that's it." And it was like, "Oh, you want a job?" And it was like, it seemed strange to me that they didn't, but they seemed quite happy just sort of sitting out in St. George's Hill, you know, just languishing. I always wanted to make the group great and even greater. And when we made Let It Be, and it was a bit crummy, I insisted that we made Abbey Road. Because I knew what we were capable of, and I didn't think we pulled it off in that Let It Be. And then with the Phil Spector remix, we kind of walked away from that LP. We didn't really want to know. In fact, the best version of it was before anyone got hold of it. The Glyn Johns early mixes were great, but they were very bare, very Spartan album, but it's great. Now it would be one of the hippest albums going if they brought it. It'd probably on bootlegs.
Yeah, sure.
But before it got its overdubs, before it had all its raw edges of it, that was like one of the best Beatle albums because it was a bit kind of avant-garde really, because it was just purely as we recorded it down there in Apple or on the roof. It was that with a good sound on it from Glyn Johns, just a couple of mics over the drums, and very basic because he's a basic approach. I loved it, but. No, but it wasn't on the Let It Be thing. On those things, often. Yeah.
It's also about the
So I became known as being overpowering. So it was Abbey Road we were doing, yeah, Maxwell's Silver Hammer, because I got some grief on that. It took 3 days to do that. Now you know how long Trevor Horn takes to do a mix for Frankie.
Sure.
You know, so that's the strange thing. I feel vindicated as time goes on. I'm beginning to understand what I was doing, and that it was half of it was as innocent as I thought it was. I didn't think we got Maxwell Silverhammer right. So I kept pushing to get it right. And they said, man, we spent 2 days on this song already. Which, you know, now, 2 daes it takes to switch on the Fairlight. Yeah, it does, man. I had a group the other day, spent 2 days trying to find the on switch. Seriously, but that's what we're into these days, you know. So, let's say, you know, on one of the sessions, it was around about Maxwell Silverhammer time. This did used to, I'm sure it did piss people off, and much as I tried to not piss people off, obviously, if you are, I don't know, driving force, overbearing, whatever you want to call it, if you are on the ball, perfectionist, whatever, it can annoy some people. Because some people can just say, oh, come on, man, hang out, come and just have go and have a drink, you know, let's go have a smoke or something, let's just lie. Which, you know, I did plenty of anyway. I mean, it wasn't as if I was just a relentless crazy. I mean, I did plenty of the other. It just seemed to me when we had a session booked, it was a cool idea to turn up. You know, but that wasn't always the case. Like Sergeant Pepper, George turned up for his number and a couple of other sessions, but not very much else.
Because George was supposed to have resented you for always getting on his back.
He did resent it. But you see, for instance, 2 examples. One, on Abbey Road, I was beginning to get too producery for everyone. George Martin was the actual producer, and I was beginning to sort of be too definite. And George and Ringo turned around and said, oh, look, piss off. We're fed up. Just back off. We're fine. We're grown-ups, and we can do it without you, fine. So I kind of go, oh, one of those people like me who don't realise when they're being overbearing. It can be it can come as a great surprise to actually be told you are overbearing, you know. So I completely climbed up and sort of backed off and sort of went, right, okay, I'm burned. Back off. They're right. I'm a turd. Sit here, fine. Okay, guys. So a day or so went by, 2 days, and the session started to flag a bit. Ringo eventually turned and said, come on, produce. Come on. And so it was like, you couldn't have it both ways, you know. You either had to have me doing what I did, which, let's face it, you know, I hadn't done too bad, or I was going to back off and become paranoid myself, which is what happened. There's a lot of Wings was to do with that I'd been told I was so sort of overbearing, that for instance, if the guitarists in Wings wanted to play a solo a certain way, I wouldn't dare tell them not, that it wasn't a good idea. And the other example that really pissed George off, but I do think I was right, was when we were making Hey Jude, but you're older. I hear it now, you know, it's still got the same. Anyway, was we're making Hey Jude, and to me, it had to have a sparse opening. Hey Jude, 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 just have this intimate opening, and it was going to build, and a kitchen sink, and eventually get to Nirvana, or near Nirvana. Anyway, so I started off, Hey Jude, and George went, don't make it bad, take a sad song, I'll make it better, and George was answering every line through the whole song, and I just said, no, I really don't want that, it's my song. So we always had, the rule was whoever's song it was, had to say how the arrangement. So of course, you know, that pissed him off. And I'm sure I pissed Ringo off when he couldn't quite get the drums to USSR, and I sort of sat in. I'm actually still very aware of that. It's a very weird thing to know you can do a thing that someone else is having trouble with, because one, you make it very simple, but just going down and doing it and just bluffing right through it and thinking, the hell, at least I'm helping. But obviously the paranoia comes in is, but I'm going to show him up. And I was very sensitive to that. I was sitting around thinking, should I say? It always came to, you should have said something. So, you know, it's very hard thing to balance that. So in the end, like I said, sometimes I was overbearing, sometimes they liked it, so it worked out.
Do you have much to do with them now, George?
I'm just starting to get back with them, really. It's all business troubles. It's all business troubles.
Seems to be. I mean, you know,
that's what spoils the whole thing for us. If we don't talk about Apple, we get on like a house on fire. The minute anyone mentions Apple, something comes up, and they'll sort of say, well, you wouldn't show us your records to the accounts or something. And I'll sort of say, but I did. Your man is now at this moment in my office. And I say, oh, like hell he is. And we have major misunderstandings over things like that. But I do bend over backwards to try and not be sort of crazy with that stuff. But no, so I've just started to see them again, and I had a great day the other day with George. He came down to visit me, and we really had, for the first time in billions of years, had a nice time. Because George was my original mate in the Beatles.
Well, more than...
I knew George,
yeah.
before. Well, he lived near me, so we lived in Upton Green,
yeah.
little close kind of thing. And I lived in Ardwick Road, and it was like half a mile away. So we were mates, took the same bus to the same school, the 500, which was the Express. So we took the same bus, so we often would sit together, and then we got a guitar about the same time. And we went through the chord books, the same Bert Weedon guitar technique chord books, and we learned D and A together, and E. And we were quite big buddies then. So that was something I'd missed really through all these years. You know, we got all professional and Beatles and everything. You lose that, obviously. And he just came down the other day and we didn't talk anything about Apple. And we didn't pick it. Somebody said, so I told somebody else this the other day, that I'd seen him. And they said, did you play together? It was American. I said, no, didn't touch an instrument, didn't do anything. It was just back as mates, like on the bus, because he's very into trees and planting and horticulture, as I am more now. So we talked about planting trees. What's that plant? That's nice. And it was really great to actually sort of relate as two people and try and get all that crap out the window, put it up to one side for once. There's such a waging of that stuff.
But that seems to be part of the process. He seems to be emerging more anyway. Actually,
yeah,
sort of
it's coming to now. We're all kind of coming to. I mean, we all brushed off this whole Beatle episode and sort of said, well, it's no big deal. Obviously, it's a big deal. It was a huge deal, right? You know, if there ever was a big deal, that was it. Like, you know. So I don't think half of us know what happened to us really. I mean, I can never tell you what year I think was. Literally, they all just go into like a haze for the years. So I know like what we did and what we did, but I keep seeing pictures of myself like shaking hands with Mitzi Gaynor. I didn't know I met her. I mean, it's that vague. And yet, I look as straight as a die in there. I'm not kind of.
I mean, is that because you're on speed or dope?
I don't think so. No, I think it was just life was speeding.
Yeah.
You would just meet Mitzi Gaynor for 5 minutes, and then you go and meet Jerry Lewis's kids. It's kind of very difficult after a while just to know if you met 50 of them. In LA, you know, we met millions of them. It was probably just one of those star celebrity bashes. But I keep seeing photos of me with people that I didn't even know I'd met. Quite embarrassing. It's just saying how I met you, and they're very famous. You know, anyone else in the world would remember they'd met them.
And they
It seems like I'm being arrogant. They think I'm being arrogant. Exactly. It's Flaco. I mean, it is. Bowie's got that problem too, because he was probably a bit more flaky. But he's got huge periods of his life he just does not know what happened. What a scene! It's a laugh though, I'll tell you that much. That's some good times. But no, you know that kind of thing goes on.
But I mean, were you aware of kind of were you aware of this, or were you just like living your life and you hear suddenly you're worth so much and then you're worth so much?
Yeah, we used to ask them, am I a millionaire yet? And I used to say cryptic things like, on paper you are. So what's that mean? It is in one of those little green things. Yet. So, well, it's not actually in a bank, but with the paper and the thing, you know, we think you are. It's actually very difficult. The accountants never made you feel successful. I remember we had the top 5 in America, and I decided I wanted to buy a country house. And I wasn't asking for the world, you know, it was those days it would have cost whack. And I went to the accountant, you have to get a mortgage. What do you mean a mortgage? You know, aren't we doing well yet? Got the top 5, you know. There's got to be some money coming up. They always try to keep you down. So you didn't actually get much of a feeling of being very rich. And I mean, the first time I actually saw checks was when I left Apple. And it wasn't me that saw them, it was Linda. Because we'd co-written a few of our early things. I Live and Let Die, she helped me with some words on. So I put her down as co-writer, which the writers didn't like, yes, which is 80% didn't like. In fact, they sued me. Very charming, I thought. It was all settled some way. Lee Eastman stepped in and settled. So, very good, probably. was his top man. But no, the first checks were Linda's. I actually saw royalty checks coming to Linda. Oh, wow, I bet I got a few of them somewhere. But mine never came to me. Always went to a party, aforementioned, and it always just went down a big well. We never saw any. So didn't have much of a feeling of being that well off, although we spent it with great glee.
Miles, do you?
Which Miles? International Times. Yeah.
He was told a story of like going down to the Asher's place. I think you were away on tour. Peter Asher showed him. And he sort of looked at it. He sort of said, "Look," and they opened a cupboard and like.
Yeah, I've heard that story. In fact, I read it.
Well,
I'll tell you. I mean, maybe that's true. I don't remember that, and things do get exaggerated. Maybe I've unexaggerated my memory of it. I never remember actually having a wad of money like that. I certainly.
Because I always heard that like when Brian did the deals.
It was nice of him. I said it was the 60s. Maybe that's why I never saw him. He probably had it away. No, I mean I don't really remember that. In fact, I did. That was another thing. Because I saw the word Miles. I did know Miles very well. He was a good mate. Yeah, I haven't seen him for a long time. But he was like my mate. Is he done against Bob? Great. Yeah. That'd be all right because he's a good guy. Barry it is because he was being very cranky. That's cool. What's your name? Miles. Miles what? We had many a wondrous stoned evening at his place with listening to all sorts. See, that was another of the interesting things that. See, I think I've got like a certain personality. To me, if I give charity, I don't like to shout about it. So some people think I don't give charity. If I know I get into avant-garde stuff, I don't particularly shout, "Hey, you know what I'm into now? Avant-garde stuff." I just kind of do it and get on with it. So way before John met Yoko and got avant-garde, I was like the avant-garde London bachelor with Miles, my pad in St. John's Wood. I was making like 8mm movies, showing them to Antonioni. That was pretty far out stuff, and putting. I had all sorts of theories, of music synchronization, where we put on a Ravi Shankar record to our home movies and it'd synchronize. I just did it with my kids the other day, actually, with our home movies. It does, it fits. Yeah, I was doing this in the 60s. But, I had a lot kind of looking slightly, this is great, we should do more. This sort of attitude of, well, I am sort of what I am, and this is me just learning. Miles, anyway, turned me on to a lot of that International Times, what's it called, the Green Review or something? Evergreen.
Yeah.
Evergreen.
You tell me about your hobby of painting.
And we used to do a lot of that. But I mean, it never really came out about me. When John went avant-garde, you knew about it.
Was that because he was a self-publicist, or was it just the happy?
No, he's just enthusiasm for whatever he was doing. John was very upfront. I'm not as upfront. I'm just a different personality. It just doesn't occur to me to tell people everything I'm doing. But I was into quite a sort of heavy avant-garde trip. I'd sit with Burroughs in the basement, and there was a couple of gay guys that William Burroughs that knew William, who was like friends of mine. I don't know how I got in. Jumped in the bar and I had faith in the crowd. And it was a scene around London. It didn't matter, gay, schmay, who cared, And we used to sit down in Montague Square, where John eventually got a flat. That was
we got busted.
Connection, where he got busted. That was where we used to go. And I remember sitting around with Burroughs, to do little tapes, and backward guitar, and cello, and crazy stuff. But it didn't occur to me, the next Enemy interview I did, to say, "Hey, have you heard of William Burroughs, man? He's in town, and he's writing the greatest album." I mean, it would have been good for me to do that, I don't know. I just kind of do what occurs to me, and sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. But I say, Yoko turned up to see me first in London. She met me before she met John.
Yes, no, I didn't know that.
See, this is what I mean. And you won't hear it off them either, because they're Scotland's elder. They want the story just how they put it out. She turned up for a charity thing. It was something to do. She wanted manuscripts. Something to do with avant-garde music. Cage, John Cage in New York. There was some benefit for somebody, and she was looking for manuscripts. any spare lyric sheets you had around, and I was pretending to be on the backs of envelopes, quite funky little things. And to tell you the truth, I didn't want to give her any. Big deal. So, I'm allowed, I don't have to, do I? I didn't want to. I kept these manuscripts, they're very precious to me, and the cause didn't seem so great, I forget what it was. So I said, but my mate might be interested. John, I gave her John's address, and I think that was first how they hooked up. And then she had her exhibition and stuff, and then their side of the story starts to happen then. Also, I kind of say, I feel like I'm kind of justifying living, which is a bit of a piss off, because I don't really want to have to sit around and justify myself. It's a bit humiliating. But there are lots of things that haven't come out. I mean, for instance, when they bust up their marriage, she came through London. He was in LA doing Pussycats with Nielsen, having a generally quite crazy time of it all. And he was the guy, the famous story, don't you know who I am? He says to the waitress, she says, yeah, the gent with the Kotex on his head. And he was doing that, and fighting the photographers and haranguing the Smothers Brothers. And generally being, they loved Yoko, and they had a very, very deep, strong relationship. But they were into all sorts of crazy stuff, and I don't know the half of that. A lot of people don't know the half of that. There's hints that it keep coming out in books, but you never know whether you can believe those.
I mean, occultism or
all sorts. But I certainly did get a postcard. We all got postcards from Yoko saying, go around the world in a southeasterly direction, it would be good for you. You're allowed to stop at 4 places. George Martin got one of those, and he says, it'd be all right if I go to Montserrat. I said, no. Actually, John did the voyage. John went on a southeasterly direction out on the road. But we all kind of went, sure, we'll go around the southeast. I mean, I sat with John and Yoko. And I was going to tell you about the marriage thing. I remember, there's so many memories come flooding in. And it's like a psycho session the minute I get on this stuff. I'm on the couch, and I'm just trying to purge it all, I sat at dinner with them once. Linda and me came over, and we sat at dinner. And John said, you fancy getting the tree panning thing done? I said, well, what is it? He said, well, you get a hole bored in your skull, and it relieves the pressure on the mouth. I said, well, look, we'll sit at dinner. And this is seriously being offered as a serious. It wasn't a joke.
It was in the 60s, by the way.
Yeah.
Because other people were into that.
Yeah, they were into it. Now, this wasn't a joke. This is like, let's go next week. We know a guy who can do it, and maybe we all go together. Yeah. I said, well, look, you go and have it done. If it works great, tell us all about it. We'll all have it. But I'm afraid I've always been a little bit cynical about stuff like that. Thank God, I think. Because I think, there's so much crap you've really got to be careful of. But John was more open to things like that. I think his quote about Klein kind of sums it up. Anyone who's been so bad-mouthed can't be that bad. And there was this kind of crazy reverse logic that anyone who's that bad must be good.
All right, yeah.
And it's very difficult when you start all crazy.
Hitler must be okay.
Hitler presumably must have had some good points. But this is what I mean. It's very difficult to cope with that kind of thinking. Because you're having to, it's bad enough just trying to be logical. But trying to be reverse logical is like very difficult. I remember getting letters from priests. This is a priest at a monastery used to send letters, where he turned all the words backwards. And that was a hard habit to get out of. Don't know if you've ever gone through that. Where God becomes dog, life becomes evil, and all that stuff. And he was doing this trick. And you start looking at every word then. Memo is memo. Yeah, it's like numerology. You can't look at numbers without doing the calculation. And I had to train myself to stop, man. I don't want to know about this. I'm sure anyone who's interested, great, good luck to you. I wouldn't put you down. I'm sure there's a lot in it. But I'm crazy enough anyway.
But were you, you were smoking a lot of dope as well. Were you getting paranoid as well? It does make it doesn't help.
No, it doesn't. No. Yes, getting quite paranoid, yeah. I was telling you about the marriage thing. When they broke up, Yoko came through London and visited us, which was very nice. And Linda and I just got married just a bit before. We lived in this big sort of old house in St. John's Wood. And Yoko came by and we started talking. Obviously, the important subject for us is what's happened. you've broken up then. You know, you're here, he's there. What's happening? And she was very nice and confided in us that, yeah, you know, it's kind of broken up. But she was being very strong about it, but very, not feminist, but being a strong woman rather than just submitting to it all. And she said, no, he's got to work his way back. If he's to get back with me, I can't just go. And she couldn't, which is good, you know. I mean, I think she would be mad to just go and prostrate herself at his feet kind of thing. But she said, no, he's going to have to work it. And I said, well, look, I mean, if I see him, one, are you still in love? Do you still love him? She said, yeah. I said, well, would you think it was an intrusion if I kind of said to him, look, man, she loves you, and there's a way to get back, and you can, it sounds like Beatles songs, it sounds like those, I send all my loving from me to you. And I said this to Yoko, I said, would that be okay? Would you hate that? But, you know, we might see him around, so I would like to be a mediator in this, because I think the two of you obviously got something pretty strong going. And she said she didn't mind. So that was that visitor. We went out to visit them and they were doing Pussycats. And it was weird to kind of just meet and everything. But then I just said to John, who was in the house with Nielsen, Jesse, Keith Moon, a few of the guys, and they were all, it was a pretty crazed house there. You know, you hear some of the stories come out of that house. And, it was pretty wild days. And I said to him, hey, come in. Come in the back room, I want to talk to you privately. Two men in the back room. I sat him down privately and I said, look, I feel a bit like a matchmaker here. But this girl, she really still loves you. Do you love her? In the divorce court, you know, divorce settlement. I don't know what to do. I said, well, I'll talk to her. So she does still love you, but you're going to have to work your little ass off, man. You have to get back to New York. You have to take a separate flat. You have to send her roses every fucking day. You have to work at it like a bitch, and you just might get her back. Which is sort of what he did. But you'll never hear that story. You won't hear that off them because, I don't know, I mean, it gives me too much, I'm too in the story then. They don't want me in the story. I prefer to think John, if you hear it from John's point of view, it'll just be that he spoke to her on the phone and she said to him, come back and start working.
But I always sort of found it interesting the fact that it seemed too much like coincidence to me, the fact he got married, you know, a month after you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it was, we spurred each other into marriage. I mean, you know, they were very strong together, which left me out of the picture. So I got together with Linda and then we got strong, got our own kind of strength. And I used to listen to a lot of what they said. I remember him saying to me, you've got to work at marriage, which is something I still remember as a bit of advice. You know, I still remember that. And then, yeah, I think again, you know, they were probably a little bit sort of peeved that we got married first. Probably a little way, you know, just minor jealousies. And then so they got married.
But I wondered if
I don't know. I mean, who knows? I don't make it up.
I wondered if there was that thing, you know, like you have two blokes like good mates. You know,
yeah.
And then, you know, one of them finds a girl, and the other, you know, maybe the other one doesn't want to. You know, it's like a lot of kind of, you know, the friendship often breaks up. You know, there's quite a lot of bitterness and acrimony.
Wedding Bells.
It seemed like one of
Wedding Bells is what it was. The song, the Wedding Bells are breaking up that old gang of mine.
Sure. Yeah.
And we used to know that song. Jim Vincent did it. And we used to sing it. Oh, again, come. They forgot Sweet Adeline. And we used to know that song. So the association we had when we were young was Army. It was sort of Army song. You know, Army buddies and Wedding Bells breaking up this Army. But for us, the Army became the Beatles. So we always kind of knew that one day Wedding Bells would come true. And that was when it did. So, you know, I mean, the thing is, the trouble is in trying to set the record straight and trying to do all this, I don't want to blame John or make anyone think. I mean, I did this thing recently with Hunter Davis, and they pulled out the one line, John could be a manoeuvring swine. Well, I still stick to that, but I'd better not say it to the Sun, you know, because I'll just get hauled over the coals again. The point was, John was a very human guy, and if you got in a business meeting with him, I mean, I'll tell you exactly why I said that, was that we had a business meeting to break up the Beatles, one of the famous ones that we've been having, still haven't done it, 17 years later. we had this meeting. We were in New York, and we all flew in. Especially George came off his tour, his disastrous tour he had. It wasn't too good. Ringo flew in, Ike flew in. We were all in New York at the Plaza for the big final settlement meeting. And John was a coder. And as you know, with New York geography, that's like half a mile away. And John sent a balloon over. Listen to this balloon. Well, you've got to be pretty cool to kind of handle that stuff, you know. Oh yeah, George rung him up. You fucking maniac, gonna take your fucking dark glasses off and come and look at us, man. And gave him a whole load of that shit. And later, I was around at the same time with another meeting, similar thing, where John, everything was going swinging, we had it all settled. Well, last minute, John asked for an extra £1 million. It's all he wanted. It's an extra £1 million. So, of course, that meeting blew up, disarray, and that finished that particular meeting. Later, we got a bit friendlier, you know, because occasionally there were little stepping stones of friendship in this kind of Apple Sea, you know. And one of those times, I said to him, what was all that about, man? Why did you actually opt $1 million? He said, I just wanted cards for my hand. I wanted cards to play with. Now that's a maneuver. That's the kind of, I wouldn't do that. Somebody who's, it's good. It's a good, absolutely standard business practice. You know, he just wanted cards to play with. He wanted a couple of jacks to up your pair of nines. And that's, you know, he was quite open about that. But of course, if I come out now that he's sort of died and all the tragedy that's sort of surrounded him, particularly, you know, the assassination, the craziness, that it would just be a maniac and stuff. It wouldn't just be a car accident. It was particularly, in a way, I'm kind of expected to just sort of say he was a saint. He was always a saint. I remember him as a saint. I love him as a saint. But that would be a lie. He was one great guy, and part of his greatness was that he wasn't a saint. He was a great guy, but he was pretty sacrilegious and pretty upfront about it, you know. That was half the fun.
You got an awful lot of shit for that remark you made, like when you were asked about if you'd been killed, you know, it's a drag.
It's a drag, yeah.
But that seemed to me like, I didn't understand why, because that seemed to me like classic understatement, you know. I could envisage, you know, saying that. I mean, when you're saying it's a drag, you're always actually saying it's appalling, you know.
Yes, exactly, yeah. But, you know, I think why some politicians are so successful is that they have a little bleeper box in their head before they say things. They run things through their mind and they can see it as a headline. If it doesn't look good, they edit it.
Sure.
I have that sometimes, but I don't always have that, particularly in moments like that, where all my bleepers go out the window. I mean, we were very surprised to go to work that day. That was like a kind of shock, because, you know, I wasn't going to sit at home. Tell you that, you know, just sitting home and watching television and watching the news.
So you went to Air?
So we went into Air London. George Martin rang me up and said, "Do you want to cancel?" You know, I understand if you do. And I said, "No way." I said, I got to walk through this day. So we came up, and it wasn't too bad getting in there, and we did our work of sorts. There's a track called Rain Clouds we were working on, so it was pretty strange. And there was a little Aeolian, Paddy of the Chieftains, you know, Paddy the Aeolian pipesman. He worked on it. He was good, actually. He was just the right kind of character to see that day, because he's like a sort of magic leprechaun, Paddy. So it was nice to sort of have a magic person around. It was as if he was a guru somehow, sent to help that day out. So we just beaving on, and just kind of, you know, occasionally sort of. And what had happened is people would do jokes, not meaning it, kind of say, "Well, we'll do the film next week. Yeah, we'll shoot it." And then you heard the word shoot, you go, oh, and everyone, you know, everything you said seemed to be shoot, or, well, we'll, you know, don't cut me. And every time you spoke, you seemed to say all these terrible things. And then eventually, you know, I just thought, well, I've just got to go home now, you know, there's no more work to be done, like, I can't stay here all night. I couldn't hide it any longer. I came out of the place, and somebody just stuck the microphone, the proverbial microphone, in the window of the car, which I'm mad enough to have open. Because, see, I'm quite outgoing. I was telling the fans, thank you, it's all right, you know. Fab Macca, thumbs aloft, wacky, To me, that's just being nice. That's just, you see every Liverpool, all right, mate, so do it. It's ordinary to me. I'm not going to carry any can for that kind of shit. To me,
That
that's
also helps
okay.
it out as well, doesn't it? I mean,
Well, they've now started saying that it's my armour against the fans.
Nick Lowe's said that.
Yeah, it isn't. It isn't an armour. It's perfectly a straightforward way of saying being friendly with people. You know. Anyway, so they stopped saying anything, and he said, "What do you think of the murder of John Lennon?" or something? And I actually, if you heard how I said it, it was what you thought. I said, "It's a drag," and I meant, if I could have, I might have just lengthened that word "drag" for about 1,000 years to get the meaning in it. But it was all over and done with. And of course, the minute that appears in print, in black and white, Paul McCartney, I'm being asked, and the editors have been to it, and so on and so on, and I'm just one of a million punters saying what it is. Paul McCartney, they did in downtown London last night at 9 o'clock, was asked by our reporter, a correspondent, what is it feeling to wear on hearing the death of his dear The score was, it's a drag. Hey ho, on to other matters. In the Philippines today, and people are sure, it's a drag, that's what he said.
No, I understood it. I'm sure a lot of people, known kind of Fleet Street report editors did understand it, It's just,
well, Hunter Davis was on the television that night giving a very reasoned account of John. Yes, he sprang right up there. The puppet sprang right up, and all
I thought it was a bit odd.
I thought it was well tasteless. We all did actually. Jesus Christ, we're ready with the answer, aren't we? Aren't we just ready with the summary? Mind you, Hunter had admitted to us years ago that he already had our obituaries written. They're all written and on file at the Times. They just update them every so often. Which is kind of chilling to learn, that he'd already done us. Well, so obviously he just pulled his obituary out for John and went to it, But, the question is, which is the more sensitive thing? My thing or his thing? You pay your money, you take your choice. He was the guy I rang up about manoeuvring swine too. So it shows what a buddy he is. Immediately put it in print. He didn't sort of edit it out and say. Well, to give him his due, he did actually. In the larger context of it, it was quite nice. It was quite reasonable, and he put my point of view. But again, that incident reminded me of John saying we're bigger than Jesus, which is a Maureen Cleave article for the Evening Standard, and John and Maureen were good friends. And in context, it was actually John saying to the church, hey, wake up. We're bigger than you. You actually read that article.
He's saying, you should get your shit together.
Exactly. He was saying, the church is in decline, which it certainly is. Certainly nothing wrong with that statement. Well, here anyway. It's a lot of born again in America, Reagan and that. But over here, it's having a hard time. And he was commenting on that, and she sort of said, so he said, well, for Christ's sake, he said, we're bigger than Jesus these days. And he meant church audiences, the church congregations or audiences are on the decline, And he was as always trying to be helpful and trying to, just give his point of view. But you take that out, you send it to Selma, Alabama, you put it on the front page, and you've got little 11-year-olds thumping on your coach window, saying, blasphemer, devil worshipper, blasphemer, devil worshipper. Never forget that sight of a little blonde kid trying to get to us. He would have done it if he'd have got to us too. But at 11, what does this kid know of life and religion? Anything? He's just been whipped up. Are they? Fine. So we've got a little longer, presumably, have we? Where are they? Where are they?
They're just outside.
Okay, so want to come and tell you something?
Yeah, I'd love it.
Can we have a little